Hi everyone, welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. This is your hub for engaging in deep conversations around serotonergic hallucinogens that alter perceptions, affect cognitive processes, induce mystical and spiritual experiences. Enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. I have with me Bonnie Divina Maa. She is a registered nurse and a shamanic practitioner. So I'm going to ask your help to welcome Bonnie to our show. So nice to see you and meet you, Bonnie. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Susan, thank you so much. It's such an honor.
Thank you. So firstly, as always, traditionally, we like to dive into your story and find out, how did you come into the medicine space?
Yes. So I was called to the medicine in 2012 when I have what so many of us know is the dark night of the soul. And the first medicine, I had been working with psychedelics for about, oh gosh, it's since my early 20s. However, not so much for the purposes of divinity, more for the purposes of recreational sort of fun use. And so I basically had this entire life, tumultuous life change, all of the things that we hear about, divorce, psychotic breakdowns, leaving my entire life behind and starting this whole new journey. And Mother Ayahuasca found me in a really random way, which was when I was at a festival. I happened to just befriend someone really briefly. He got my information. And that was back in the day when certainly we didn't hear about ayahuasca. Ceremonies were not advertised on the internet. Um, and we would receive things in the mail. And so lo and behold, I get this letter in the mail, a very curious letter, explaining all of this, what we call Dieta, which is all of the dietary restrictions and things that are needed to do to attend this singing ceremony. And so I thought, this is really interesting. And I'm wondering what this is all about. And I showed it to a friend and she said, I think that might be ayahuasca. And I said, what's that? And it felt right and it felt in flow and it felt like a calling. And so I followed the Dieta and I attended my first ayahuasca ceremony a couple of weeks later. And wow, did she really spiral me into a whole new way of being? And as she does sometimes, and as these plant medicine teachers can do for us, the next thing I knew, I really did leave everything behind. I quit my job completely. I left my home. I went to India. I did the whole eat, pray, love, and became a spiritual seeker. And from that point, ayahuasca became a integral part of my existence. And through that experience, I developed a beautiful relationship with her, which then much later I found myself in the jungle in the Amazon helping facilitate ceremonies, learning a lot of the shamanic ways of being. It led me to other entheogens, and then I became a facilitator, a practitioner with some of those medicines. And through all of that experience, I learned, of course, what we're going to talk about today, which is the shadow side of those medicines. Uh, So in brief, that's my story in particular with the entheogens. As you know, I'm a registered nurse. I'm not a practicing nurse anymore. I gave that up completely a couple of years ago. That's another thing the plant medicines did for me, is to help me to transition into this new part of my life, where now I work primarily through Zoom and also in person, helping people heal themselves. And I do that through a variety of modalities, but primarily shamanic modalities that I've learned in various places, mainly in Peru.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. So would you say that medicines are just the one part of your toolbox? It's in your toolbox. They're not just the only thing. They're not, it's not the work that you do only, but they are just part of the bigger sort of holistic part of the offers that you have. Would you say that?
Yes, I would say that 100%. Yeah, plant medicines or other entheogens we know are not for everyone, and we don't all need them. We know that there's many ways to get to the same place. I like to say that the entheogens are perhaps one of the ways we press that fast forward button. So they can definitely accelerate that process for us if we're ready to get on that roller coaster and ride it. And yes, it's a part of how I help people, and also, of course, in my own journey, which continues. And there are many other modalities that I also use.
Amazing. Yes. And today, let's dive in without further ado. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you, I think you're the perfect person because I came across your post and I was really intrigued. And this has been coming to my attention now lately, in the medicine space. And yeah, talking about the dark side of the psychedelic medicines, I think it's very timely. We are hearing only because of the way that is kind of hitting the mainstream. As you said, nowadays ceremonies are advertised online. It's not a secret anymore. Everybody can access. People access to these videos, like analogs of people's experiences on YouTube videos. And, there's lots of anecdotal stories. And of course, people do want to seek that healing, especially now post pandemic. It's kind of fueling the way that people are seeking psychedelic substances now, I believe. This is my observation. So now the risks are arising because we're dealing with a indigenous tool that is now being offered to Western people. And the Western people, they have a very different perspective when it comes to swallowing pills, right? Because we prescribe with all kinds of pharmacological medicines. So we have a very different understanding when it comes to medicine. So, and I heard, I think it was the Soul Quest, they did a conversation on it. It was a very beautiful conversation they had actually, that they talked about how these medicines can interact with some of these entheogenic medicines. So now the risk arises. So I would love to get your insights on that because I know you're quite passionate about this part as well.
Yes, thank you so much. So, as you know, we live in a world of duality. And so there's always going to be a shadow side to everything. As I've come through different worlds, say the yoga world, the tantra world, and the medicine world, it seems like the stories are always the same. There's a certain amount of spiritual bypassing that's always taking place. There's abuse of power, specifically, as we know, a lot of sexual abuse, but there's also other ways that people are exploited, financially exploited as well, and that works on both sides. If we're talking about the indigenous versus Western culture, sometimes it's the Westerners who are being exploited, and also the indigenous shamans who are being exploited, the medicines themselves being exploited, the land, etc. We also start to come into the dangers of what I call part-time shamans. So people who jump on the bandwagon really quick, and often they're really well-meaning. They had this profound experience, and now they want their mother and their sister and everyone to have this experience, and they want to go open up their healing center. yet they haven't done their due diligence, and they begin serving medicines and doing this kind of work before they've really completed and integrated their own experience. Like you said, the medicines are much more easily attainable. The ceremonies are advertised on the internet, which can be very dangerous, especially if people are not screened properly coming to those ceremonies. The medicines themselves being sold on the internet, there's a lot of dangers that goes into that. We get into then even the recreational use or of these entheogens, which we didn't think that could be possible. Like how could it be possible that someone would keep going to a substance like ayahuasca, which can be a really uncomfortable experience. Yet we do find people who all say are addicted to ceremony. And then of course, like you just brought up, there are the deaths and other adverse events that are occurring as a result of drug interactions, people not being screened properly. I think we actually connected through a post that I wrote about that was surrounding a death that unfortunately recently happened in a community here. So the ones that I brought up are some of the big ones, some of the ones that I have experienced personally, seen and heard about a lot. And so if you want to just dive in, we can, maybe pick one topic and explore it a little and then go on to another. But I'll just use that as an introduction a little bit deeper into the shadow side.
Yeah, that's beautiful start. Yes, let's talk about the idea of just attending to a ceremony space. People that just think that it's all good, and whoever serves the medicine. Maybe we can talk about that incident that happened. What do you think went wrong, and what do you think that could have been done, or how could it be prevented, let's say?
Yeah. So, and prevention is always, of course, the key. And so any good practitioner is going to be always aware of the potential things that can go wrong and is going to do their best to prevent them. That comes through careful screening and education and information. And that is one thing that is severely lacking still. So in the case that you and I connected through, I don't know in particular what went wrong, because there's still more investigation to be done. But it's clear that there was some sort of drug interaction. In the case of this person who was holding this ceremony, I've looked into their history a little bit. And as far as I know, this person was not adequately trained. They do seem to be one of those people who jumped on the bandwagon, perhaps, wanted to do something that was really good for a lot of people, yet did not understand that it's a huge responsibility. And when we are serving these medicines to others, we literally are taking their lives in our hands. So whether his ego got out of control, which is something that I see often that happens, right? The ego just starts to go crazy. It takes over. And perhaps, maybe he served 100 or more people and nothing went wrong. So we thought nothing could go wrong. There was the abuse of power that came into play. Not being completely transparent, right? Not informing, not receiving informed consent from the women involved. And so in that situation, it's my understanding that this person served these women some rapé, which we know is a tobacco snuff that is generally pretty harmless, unless it's laced with something. And in this case, it most definitely was laced with something. Now, in a separate incident, in someone else that I know personally, he had laced this rapé with ketamine. Fortunately for these women, these other two women that I knew that this happened to, they were okay. They just spent a night on ketamine, which was very uncomfortable and not something that they wanted or desired. Why someone would think it's okay to serve someone ketamine, you know, and trick them like that into ingesting that substance, you know, I could think of probably, I guess there's many reasons, but at the end of the day, it's carelessness, negligence, and certainly not having any respect for what informed consent is, or any knowledge that this could actually create some sort of interaction that could be very harmful for someone.
Yeah.
It's reckless behavior is what it is. In the case of the ayahuasca ceremony, I know that the two women involved who ended up in comas and one who later died were also served rapé that had something in it, something that caused them to have amnesia. The one woman who survived does not remember ingesting ayahuasca after that. She remembers receiving the rapé, and then everything got really fuzzy. And then the next thing she knew, she woke up in a coma. Her family has had to repeatedly tell her what happened because she's had difficulty even remembering and understanding how she ended up there. So there was some sort of drug interaction. And this is something that you know, we have to be very careful screening when we are working with substances like tryptamines and MAOI inhibitors. We have to understand that someone can have too much. Now, whether or not she had what we call like a serotonin syndrome or something else, I don't know the answer, you know, whether but it sounds to me like there was something that that caused a terrible drug interaction that then led these two women to end up in comas, and then one later, unfortunately, who didn't survive. There's also evidence that there perhaps was some sort of sexual abuse involved. So once these women were unable, you know, to understand what was happening to them anymore, it's possible that there was sexual abuse. And this is something that happens, unfortunately. I would have to say it's common. It's a story that I hear a lot. So that, in short, I guess, is what I can tell you about what happened in this particular incident. And more importantly, it's not an isolated incident. It's just an incident that finally got reported, and now women are speaking out. And I guess there are many women coming forward now in relation to this particular shaman, part-time shaman person who has caused this. Yeah. So no, I'll turn it back over to you for some more questions. Or
thank you for that. Yeah. So in your you know, from your understanding, what are the best practices, would you say, or what would you say to the listeners who are seeking these type of experiences? What are those harm reduction? You know, I know so many companies and organizations like MAPS Canada and some in the UK, psychedelic societies, organizations are providing harm reduction material to a lot of people. Yeah. But just top of your head, what would you say to those people who are seeking for this experience? How should they go about, firstly?
Yeah, such a good question, and really, it's of course there's many things that we need to do. So I like that you use the words best practice. That's one of the words that I'm trying to get out there too. Uh, First of all, I would ask someone if I'm attending their ceremony. Now, of course, this is not going to apply to the indigenous shamans in the jungle. We're talking about Western practitioners here. Although there's a lot of black magic and things happening down there in those areas. Don't get me wrong, but we'll stick to the Western side for now. So a best practice model. Uh, I'm encouraging practitioners now to have what we call a code of ethics, a participant bill of rights, best practice model. We have them in allopathic medicine, and I think it's prudent we should have them in this side of medicine as well. So asking, first of all, the practitioner, do you have a code of ethics? You know? And number one in the code of ethics, I believe, should be non-maleficence, do no harm. Right? And so if someone at least is going to step forward and to develop that for themselves, that at least is a first indication that we're on the right path with someone. As well as a participant bill of rights, which informed consent would be in there, right? You have a right to know exactly where this medicine came from, exactly what is in it, who brewed it, how many hands touched it, how many mail carriers it went through, because all of those things are important. So informed consent, and then also, of course, the right to have someone present at all times who is there as a protector. So I would say someone in the space who is not taking the medicine, who is solely there to serve as like an angel protector type of person. Most male practitioners I know now will not be alone with a female unless there is another female practitioner present. I think that's very important, including those that are helping in the space. I see more and more now that any male helpers are not allowed to be alone with female participants. And not that we know it can work the other way, and there's certainly there are men that are abused in this situation too. I don't want to leave them out, but for the most part, we know it's happening to women. They're more vulnerable in these situations. Proper screening and Dieta. So if you just saw a ceremony on the internet and you call up and say, "Hey, I want to attend your ceremony," and they say, "Great, come on," and that's the end of it, that's a huge red flag. Don't go to that ceremony. I attended one ceremony like that one time, just as an experiment. And it was not a good situation. Because there was no screening, there were people in that space that were there to party. There were people there who were consuming alcohol and other substances in the space, and this brings in this whole dark energy. The space is not a clean space. So I would avoid any kind of ceremony where there is not a rigorous screening process. And that screening needs to involve everything: your emotional health, your current physical health, your mental health state, all of your health history, what kind of drugs you're on, including over-the-counter medications, what the intentions are for coming to the ceremony. There's a lot of things that are involved in the screening process, because we want to weed people out who are not there for the right reasons. So if someone is not giving a proper screening, that's an immediate red flag. Don't go. you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation, potentially. It's best to, I always say, go by word of mouth. So you had a friend that went to a ceremony and they had a wonderful experience, and they went because their friend went, right? And then because their friend had gone. And so we can trace this back, and we can talk to 5 or 10 people that have had an experience with this particular practitioner. And we can then ask as well the practitioner. That's another thing, is a lot of times people are really scared to approach a shaman or a practitioner to say, hey, what's your story? How'd you end up here? You know, did you just buy some ayahuasca off the internet because you went to 3 ceremonies in Peru and now you think you're an expert, which happens a lot? Or did you do your due diligence, right? And do your master plant dietas and spend time in the jungle or, you know, various places? Did you do your own healing, right? That's a big part of the problem too, is that people have not done their own healing. And we, of course, know there's always more healing to do, yet there's a certain level of healing that we need to do first before we can step up and step into these roles for others. So I would encourage everyone to delve in to that with someone. I have a list, and I know that there are other people that have lists as well of questions to ask. Taking some time to really take in the state of the person that you see, this practitioner, right? For example, are they really nervous? Do they seem chaotic and frantic? Or are they really grounded and centered and peaceful? What's the energy around them, right? These are things that we sometimes tend to overlook, especially because people coming to ceremonies, especially people who are new to ceremonies, they're scared. They're scared to ask. Or they immediately think, well, this person is serving medicine and they're calling themselves a shaman, so they must be perfect and they must have done all their healing already, and who am I to ask these questions? No? So taking the time to tap into your own intuition and discernment. If you get a funny feeling about someone, listen to that, right? Especially if you notice the energy about a person, if they're very, like I said, if they have like a sort of a frenetic sort of an energy about them. I happen to know people in my area who are serving medicines who are addicted to amphetamines and drink alcohol every day. They don't look good. They have a strange energy about them. And I've had clients who have gone to these people and said, you know, it didn't feel right and it felt kind of weird, but I did it anyways. And now I regret it, right? So always taking a look at that person and using the judgment of just, you know, and just some basic common sense, right? As far as the Dieta goes, taking the time to spend that 2 weeks, right, with ayahuasca, and speaking about in particular, because that's the biggest one today, although there are other ones, especially things like Bufo now that are quite popular. Taking that time to really clean and do the due diligence to honor that diet process. Eliminating the foods that can create certain interactions or make it more difficult for the medicine to work. If you are on certain medications, especially like those SSRIs, which are the main ones we have issues with, although benzos and other things can create a lot of terrible interactions as well, taking the time to appropriately wean off. Of course, checking with your doctor, right? We shouldn't be going to ceremony if we're still on any of these kinds of medications. They can create deadly interactions. So those are some of, I would say, the big ones, some of the most important ones, and these are the things that people tend to not be aware of. Even I have that happen a lot. I have clients tell me, I just didn't know. I just didn't know to ask, or I just didn't know that that could be an issue, right?
Yeah.
So taking the time to do the due diligence, to do the homework, right? Because entering into these ceremonies can be one of the most beautiful, powerfully transformational and healing experiences of one's life. And it can also be the end of life if we're not careful in doing our due diligence.
Thank you so much for being so open and honest about the processes. What I love the most is the fact that you said if you feel that there is something off with the facilitator, trust that feeling. I love that because a lot of people, especially since we're keeping the conversation on the Western side of the perspective, we might have to have you back, Bonnie, for the indigenous perspective of the dark side. But for now, just for the time and, honoring your time also, let's keep it to the Western side perspective of the Westerners. And I love what you said, the gut feeling of trusting a facilitator and the space that you're going into. Somehow in the West, this is like coming from a holistic therapy background. My observations is that we've allowed this part of ourselves to just disconnect. We tend to expect the white uniformed people to tell us how we feel, that what we should eat and how we should be living our lives, the doctors, the nutritionists, and fitness health practitioners. So we've learned, I don't know when this programming taken place so deeply within us that we somehow outsource everything. We expect other people to tell us. And yet there is this inner part of us that always knows, that we most of the time dismiss. And when seeking for a ceremony space, I think we call back on that again and never dismiss the feeling of, this doesn't feel right. This person's energy is not too, I'm not too sure. All of these little things, these little details are so extremely important. And I think you nailed it there. And I think it's always great to bring it to our listeners' awareness. I think this is the number one thing for me. Especially this is a holistic practice, and taking a medicine, apart from all the screening, the medical aspects and medications and so on and so forth, there is this element that we need to feel safe and trusted, trust the facilitator and the space that this medicine is held and given. So safety, the inner safety, the nervous system safety, all of these are so much more important in having or allowing ourselves to go into that transformational process. I think that was really, really great. And I think we are going to learn more as we progress into the Renaissance. I think we're all learning that this is a very, very holistic approach, and it calls us to, again, realign and trust our intuition and step into that a bit more. I think that's when for me, that's when the medicine works begins, by just allowing yourself to trust your gut a bit more again, isn't it? So that was really profound.
Yes, absolutely. And so, yeah, trusting our gut, number one. If we're getting those little red flags in any way, take a step back and reassess the situation. Another thing that I'd like to say that's so important going into a ceremony, especially with something powerful like ayahuasca, is that integration process. We have the pre-integration, the before ceremony, and the after ceremony. And since we're talking about safe ceremony today, I'll stick to the pre-integration. and just move in a little bit more into the intention side, because intention and learning how to work with the medicine is very, very important. One of the things that I see a lot in my practice is people coming and saying to me, I didn't know that I could do that, right? Uh, so, for example, when I pre-integrate people, I teach them how to work with the medicines. I teach them how to speak to the medicines, to set intention, to set boundaries with the medicines. And so much of the time, these medicines can take us for a real ride, right? They take us and they just, it's like we're being thrashed about in a dark sea. It's not always pretty lights and rainbows, especially with something like ayahuasca. It can be extremely frightening. And so I'm working with these people all the time who have had these very frightening experiences, things that they just don't understand. And I'll tell them something like, did you know that you could have asked Mother Aya to be gentle with you, to be slow? Did you know that you could tell her, no, I don't want this right now, right? And people will tell me all the time, like, I didn't know that. I wish someone would have told me that, right? And not that it always works, but it does work a lot. And so one of the other, I would say, dangers of moving into these ceremonies is we don't understand the medicine that we're working with in any way. We're just sort of jumping into the sea blindly, not understanding that we can work with that medicine and navigate through the process with that medicine, that we can talk to the medicine, we can ask questions, and that working with intention is the most powerful part of the experience. It really guides and determines to a great degree the experience and the outcome of ceremony. We don't spend a lot of time on intention. Some of the ceremonies that I've been to, you know, we might not talk about intention at all. It was never brought up, right? And intention is the most important thing. Why are we going to this ceremony, right? And then let's delve into that a little bit more. So finding someone like me, or, you know, just doing it on your own, or a friend who's had a lot of experience, anything like that to help you delve into the intention. Intention is alchemy. It guides the experience. So that's one thing I'd really like to stress for people who are, even if it's your 10th ceremony or your 20th ceremony or your first ceremony, work with intention. Spend a lot of time beforehand with intention. Journal. I'll tell people, talk to the medicine. Make a little altar. Do something where you're bringing this medicine already into the space with you, and then you're spending a little time every day, because there's a spirit to these medicines, right? A powerful, powerful teacher. And so we can connect with that medicine and with the spirit of that medicine before we ever step foot into the ceremony. And that is going to really, really change our experience. So that's one thing moving forward that I'd like to see more of. In addition to appropriate screening, is if someone is coming to ceremony to spend at least a couple weeks or more working with that intention, and then getting into the root, understanding the traumas and the shadows that might come up, right? Because especially something like ayahuasca, she might be kind and gentle with us the first time, but then on that second time, we might be really taken for a ride. We need to be prepared to be shown things that we might have never even known were real. For example, many times people will remember sexual abuse on these journeys. So understanding that we need to be prepared. And if we do have a lot of issues like previous trauma, or we're coming to ceremony and we don't know why we have so much anxiety all the time. We don't know why we have so much stomach pain all the time. We don't know why we get so many headaches all the time, right? All of these kinds of things. Spend some time with someone who can help you go a little bit deeper and prepare you for the possibility of what may come up. And then how to be guided through that experience. And so that's why it's important in ceremonies that people are in place who can help guide you through that experience, who understand what may come up and know how to help you navigate and guide you through that experience. So being prepared for all possibilities of what might happen is really, really important when we move into these journeys.
That's amazing. And thank you for bringing up the integration partner or a coach or an integration therapist. It's so crucial, I think, for many people now that moving towards working with the medicine. So thank you for bringing that to our awareness. So I think it would definitely save many years of integrating the experiences. Now thinking about my connections, I know so many people who've explored these solo or at least in groups that integration wasn't a big thing back then, and they spent years and years trying to figure out, understand what was this whole thing was about, the experience. So I think now this is a good news because we have so many experienced people in the space that are willing to help the newcomers into helping them integrate the whole experience. So what do you see as a facilitator and also in helping people integrate their experience? What do you see in the future? And then they say that maybe the 2 years, next 2 years, that's all it's going to take before the world finds out about these substances. So what are your concerns? What are your, as somebody who's really doing this authentically, what are your concerns?
Yes.
Are there any concerns that you have? Don't. Oh, you have?
So many concerns.
Mm-hmm.
It's already happening. Interestingly enough, in the place that I live, you would never think that a little tiny town north of Houston in Texas would have so much of this already going on. But we actually have some people who have taken it upon themselves to create practitioner programs. And so these programs, I don't want to say that they're not all good or don't have some good to them, yet they are primarily to make money. And that's one of the biggest dangers, of course, with this, and that's where a lot of the shadow side comes out with all of these things, is that there is the greed side or the money side of the equation, which drives a lot of the shadow side. And so they will take anyone who wants to be a facilitator with no prior experience at all. You don't have to know the first thing about source energy. Have never had to have been to the jungle. Haven't even ever had to ingest any of these substances or have had any previous experience with entheogens. And voila, in a week, you can have a piece of paper that says you're certified to serve these medicines. And that's something we're going to see more and more and more. And that is one of my primary concerns right now, actually, as these medicines get more popular, is that these things are popping up all over the place. And now all of a sudden you can throw a rock and hit a bufo practitioner. And that's not a good thing. It's very scary, actually. Yeah. And so that's one of my main concerns right now. And something that I want to bring to light more and more are these certification programs that are happening in the West. When I explain these things to my indigenous teachers, they just don't even know what to think. They're just, they just don't even know what to think about these things. And it's concerning for them too. So that's one thing that I think is going to, as these medicines get more popular, we're going to see this more and more. And it's very important to be aware that anyone can set up a certification program. Anyone without any prior experience, you know, and someone can just say, oh, I want to set up a certification program and I'm going to bring everyone here and maybe I'm going to bring someone in, or I'm going to teach everyone whatever I know, and then or I'm going to get a bunch of information off the internet and I'm going to order some medicines and I'm going to certify a bunch of people and give them a piece of paper. And then that person's going to take that piece of paper out into the world and go, hey, here it is, guys. I'm certified. It's all good. I'm all good. Come on. And so that's a danger.
Yeah.
It's a real danger that things are happening this way in the Western world right now. Not that a practitioner program can't have some good things. I want to say that it can. But as a whole, I think they're very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they don't require people to have any prior experience.
Yeah.
It's a nice supplement. Can be a nice supplement, but it's not the end all be all. So that's something to really caution for people who are also looking to work with these medicines. Is a piece of paper doesn't mean anything. A certification doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. We've got to dig deeper. We've got to ask more questions. We've got to see that these people have done their due diligence and have been doing their own self-work for many, 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 many years, and have hopefully gone to source, right? To the source of these medicines before they think that they can serve them. I've even seen that there's like a 2-week program now somewhere where you can go and learn how to serve ayahuasca in just 2 short weeks. You can be a certified ayahuasca practitioner. Very, very dangerous. In the jungle, it's minimum of 10 years. Many, many, many master plant dietas before anyone is ever able to even touch these medicines, right? And then someone else is popping in and thinking they can do it in 2 weeks, and have a piece of paper to prove it, right? So certification programs are one of the main concerns for me at this point. Internet ceremonies would be the other one. Now people can make churches. It's pretty easy to make a church now in certain areas of the world. So people can legally create these churches where then people can come and legally have these medicines. Yet again, there's nothing to say that anybody needs any prior experience before they start a medicine church. And there's a lot of people who are doing it for reasons other than the healing. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So another big caution is around these churches. I can name many of them out there these days that are not a safe place to go, but people will think they are because they've got church, attached to their name.
Yeah.
And they're packing, in 100+ people into ceremonies. I've even heard of situations now in some of these churches where they'll have people in the next room, even 2-3 rooms full of people.
Wow.
That's just a huge danger.
But
where I sit in the jungle, we have no more than 8 people in a ceremony.
Yeah, Bonnie,
More than 8.
what are your thoughts on what is this surge, this? I even heard in Spain there is an organization serves ayahuasca to I think it's like imagine like an open house, and all day long they start from in the morning. There is no specific beginning and end time. People just coming in and sitting and taking, sitting and taking, and over the course of one day, I've heard from a very good contact of mine, actually, he said that day probably they served 200 people in one day, ongoing.
Right.
It's like
a people mill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I everything in me says no to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have all this happening. God knows what other things are happening, because we can only know certain things that, you know, we're hearing from people. But I can imagine there are much more terrifying things are happening around the world with the substances. I'm guessing. I can only
Yeah.
guess.
We've just scratched the surface here today with some of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you as we're coming towards the end of our conversation. This has been super enlightening, by the way. So thank you so much again. So one thing, you said you would only sit with around 8 people, not more, maybe 10.
I would
In a
say I've sat with up to 20, and I
yeah,
think if there is good things in place and an excellent screening process and all of that, I think that can be okay. Anyone and all of my teachers would say no more than that, and I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And also, you know, you said you mentioned about people just coming in and doing these practitioner courses. If we look at the way the indigenous medicines have been facilitated, it's all done through the elders. There is this concept in the medicine lineage that older people would serve the medicine. There is a reason why, because imagine a 20-year-old serving this medicine, which they can. I'm sure there are rare cases where there are, you know, very mature beings and they can. But is this closely tied to the way that we become mature and able to do our shadow work, and we can become a bit more open to it's probably tied to that a lot, becoming a wisdom carrier and having life experiences and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely. And in the emotional maturity, the spiritual maturity,
Yeah,
and the shedding of those ego layers, which, yes, of course, we know that there are some amazing 20-year-olds out there. I happen to know a couple of them, they're just phenomenal, phenomenal beings, they're otherworldly types of beings. Yet for most people, we know that around age 20-ish, we're not anywhere near emotionally mature yet, not anywhere near approaching a spiritual level of spiritual maturity where we can really help others and guide others. Wisdom, comes with experience and age. And so I would, again, like, that's another thing that I really caution is if you've got a 20 something, year old that's saying, hey, come on and have ceremony with me, it's highly, highly doubtful that that person is emotionally or mature, or spiritually mature enough to really, really handle that kind of container. They don't have the wisdom. It's just by nature of how we grow up, especially in the Western world. Perhaps in the indigenous world, by that time there's a level of maturity that's acceptable and safe. But we know as Westerners, now even into our 30s, we're still, having it
yeah,
seems like, the longer we're living, like it used to be 20 could be a pretty mature age. Now it's like we're kids at that age, and now even into the 30s. I'm almost 50 years old at this point, and I have to say, I still feel like I've got a lot of growing to do. Yet I still, of course, have a certain amount of wisdom and experience now, and a lot of deep work under my belt. But yeah, a really good point to bring up is that the level of emotional and spiritual maturity and the wisdom that is required to really, really hold not just a safe space, but a powerfully transformational space comes with time and experience. And yeah, so good point.
yeah. I think this is the reason that elders existed in those traditional ways of offering the medicine. So, and one last question, not so question, but also more like taking your insights. I read an amazing article that said in the West, they are trying to take away the mystical experience of the psilocybin and make it more available on the shelf for. So they wanted to somehow take away the mystical, no, take away the altered consciousness experience so that they can only focus on the benefits of releasing stress and becoming more holistic and healthy. And the article argued the opposite and said, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. The reason you get the healing or the revolutionized consciousness or revolutionizing your life is because of the mystical experience. And he couldn't understand why there would be so many companies like biotech companies investing in so much money trying to take away that part of the process. So what are your thoughts?
Very interesting. So this is the first time I've heard of something like this. One of my questions to these companies is, what are they scared of? Yeah. Why are they scared of the mystical, spiritual, divination side of this medicine, and why are they trying to take that away?
Do you
What's
think
up with that?
Yeah, do you think in the West then they're probably thinking that people are not ready? The Westerns are not ready for such divination or the mystical experiences, maybe? That they can't contain it?
I think that, that would be their own ego saying that, if that's what they're saying, because certainly that's not the truth. Absolutely, there's anyone, I think, if you're ready, you're ready, right? If you're coming to the medicine, or if the medicine has found you, you're ready. So I don't know, like, if that's what they're thinking. Perhaps it's just, I think at the end of the day, it's probably around money. And so for some reason, for whatever reason it is, they're going to make money doing it this way. And perhaps it is because maybe some people don't want to have that, just like with CBDs, right? This is perhaps why some people turn to CBDs versus the full flower with the THC and everything in it, is because they themselves are scared to have that experience or don't want that experience. So perhaps, they're thinking that there are a lot of people that don't want that. I don't know. That's a very strange thing to me, because of course I do agree that the bridging of those two things, and the science and spirituality, the mind, body, spirit, is the magic of these medicines, right? That's the magic of entheogens. They are for the purposes of divination. That's why they were put here on earth. And we have other things that can, we have so many different plants and even other kinds of mushrooms that can help with these other issues. So that's a puzzler for me. I'm going to say, I don't really know why. I'd have some friends out there who are conspiracy theorists who would say it's because they don't want us to remember who we are. Yeah. And that might be true too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. Thanks for that. And now going forward, what's in store for Bonnie, and what are your projects? What are the things that you're working on right now that you might want to share with our listeners?
Oh gosh, so many projects. So one of the main projects that I'm hoping to finish in this next year is my book. My book is called The Place Beyond the Story. It's a spiritual adventure. It's about that time in 2012 when I went through my dark night of the soul, and then had my 14-month soul's journey through India and Southeast Asia. It's so much about what I learned through that experience. And so I'm hoping to get the final edits done and have that coming out in this coming year. So that's one of my main projects that I'm going to be focusing a lot of my time on. More and more, I'm feeling called to either become a part of organization or start my own organization that focuses on educating and informing people when they're looking to go to work with entheogens, and to help practitioners, churches, all of these kinds of like organizations that are popping up around medicines, to help them understand ethical use, patient or participant rights, and to be really promoting that in these churches and in these medicine communities. So that's definitely a passion of mine that I feel like I'm being called to more and more, but nothing that's like that specific yet. And then, on the personal side, I'm going to take a little time in the next couple of months to do my own integration.
That's lovely. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love the way that you want to invest this ongoing, integration processes. That's something I love hearing also from these, facilitators and people who work with other people, integrating and helping them integrate. I think our work comes first, isn't it? It's always the one that's always, we have to dive in at different levels, different stages, and it's ongoing. It's unfolding continually. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And for the last finishing notes, your advice for people who are seeking to work with entheogenic medicines, what would you say?
Take your time. There's no reason to rush. That would be the number one thing. Do the due diligence, especially to prepare your mind, your body, and your soul for the experience. That could look like doing a lot of reading. There are books that are available about integration. That could be getting someone with someone like me, an integration coach. It could mean talking to a lot of people, friends, etc., who have a lot of experience. There's no need to rush. Take your time and then follow your intuition. And if there is ever any kind of red flag or something that's telling you that something is not right, listen to that. There's plenty of other ceremonies. There's plenty of other shamans. There's plenty of other opportunities that would lie ahead for you. So whenever you have that feeling, listen to it.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Bonnie. This has been so profound. And again, thank you for enlightening us on so many levels in terms of the dark side and becoming more aware of the dark side of the psychedelic medicines. And cannot wait to have you back again for a second part, maybe in the future.
Yeah.
And all the best with your book and everything that you're working on right now. So great to have you.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's been a pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Do get in touch with Bonnie if you have any other questions. And we'll also share your links and resources that could help with this episode's topics. Again, I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Much love.
Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.